What's influencing your vote this fall? The League of Women Voters sums it up in 6 words.
Money in politics is a problem.
Kathy Sakahara is the League's Vice President for Advocacy and co-chair of Integrity Washington, the Yes campaign for Initiative 1464.
It's about power to the voters and returning power to the voters, which is what our democracy is really based on.
I-1464 would create a new system of democracy credits, where state residents would get $150 to direct toward candidates of their choice. The money, about $30 million a year, would come from ending the non-resident tax program that allows people from states like Oregon to avoid paying sales tax here. Those who run for office don't have to use this public funding for their campaigns, but the hope is to help candidates who are facing big money competition from a handful of major donors.
Honestly, it doesn't fix the entire problem, but it is a very powerful first step.
I-1464 would also require political action groups to list their top donors in their ads, limit campaign contributions from lobbyists and government contractors, and require a 3-year gap between serving an elected office and taking a lobbyist job.
Revolving doors can sometimes go a little too fast.
Sakahara says overall, 1464 will make the political process more transparent and attract candidates who've wanted to serve in government but who've been intimidated about raising enough money.
It's time.
The idea is we want a legislature that looks like our constituents, who looks like our voters.
But 1464 looks like trouble to Jerry Vanderwood.
There are specific provisions already in state law that prevent favoritism in public contracting.
Vanderwood is chief lobbyist for the Associated General Contractors of Washington, a trade association whose political donations would be limited if 1464 passes, unlike some other groups.
Public employee unions are still free to give large contributions to candidates and politicians that they'll be sitting across the table from to negotiate public contracts. Just doesn't seem like equitable treatment to us.
Vanderwood also points out that nationwide, only 5% of us check the box on our taxes to publicly fund presidential candidates, what he sees as writing on the wall for I-1464.
It's only $3, and 95% of the public choose not to contribute taxpayer funding to a political campaign.
60% of Seattle voters chose differently last year, approving a similar democracy voucher program for city races to be used in 2017. Vanderwood says we should see how that system works before trying it statewide.
We think that it's prudent for 1464 to be set aside for a while and let the Seattle experiment play out.
I would say primarily our focus has simply been on implementation.
Renee LeBeau is program manager for Seattle's Democracy Voucher program, run by the Ethics and Elections Commission. The commission does not advocate for any ballot measure or candidate and says I-1464, if it passes or not, will not affect Seattle's program.
What we want to educate people on is how to exercise their voucher.
LeBeau and her staff are working to help people understand that they can not just vote, but also help prospective candidates kickstart their campaigns.
This is a very early part in the election process that you can actually get involved with and really affect the election before you even get to the point of the ballot.
But will I-1464's potential impact on the election impact our state's economy?
If 1464 passes, many of the retailers in our community could lose up to 25 or 30% of their retail sales.
John McDonough is president and CEO of the Greater Vancouver Chamber of Commerce, just across the river from Portland, Oregon, where thousands of Washington shoppers go to avoid sales tax.
So that retail trade is lost to the local merchants. The only way they can compete and try and replace that volume of retail sales is to not have to charge Oregon residents the Washington state sales tax.
A state Office of Financial Management report says I-1464's plan to close the non-resident tax break program would increase state revenue. But McDonough says that doesn't add up in Southwest Washington.
I guess to people that don't live in a border community and aren't in the retail sector, it looks like a loophole. But it's a survival mechanism for many of our members.
I-1464's survival this election depends on supporters selling the need for campaign finance reform up against critics who aren't buying it.
Voters don't want to spend taxpayer dollars on political campaigns.
Ultimately, we all benefit.